Everyone is talking about the cameras on the Huawei P30 Pro. From extreme optical zoom to see-in-the-dark night photos, it seems like this phone can do it all. I'm going to compare the photos and the videos from the P30 Pro to the iPhone XS Max. Now bear in mind the iPhone is last year's technology while the P30 Pro is brand new. And if you want to see how this phone compares to other Android flagships like the Samsung Galaxy S10, you can find that comparison on CNET too. While the P30 Pro isn't available in the US, it is on sale in other parts of the world. Let's talk about those cameras. The P30 Pro has a Leica quad camera around the back. There's also a time-of-flight sensor that captures depth maps to help with portrait mode and exposure. This is what the same shot looks like taken on the ultra-wide, to the wide, to the 5x optical zoom from the periscope lens. We'll talk more about how that zoom works later. The iPhone has a regular wide-angle and 2x telephoto zoom at the back. Inside, the P30 Pro uses a super spectrum sensor on its main 40-megapixel camera, which captures color in a different way to the iPhone. Find out more about how it works on CNET. Let's start with how each phone captures general shots like landscapes. Both have modes to help boost dynamic range, called Smart HDR on the iPhone, which you can toggle on from the Settings menu, or HDR on the P30 Pro, which is found in the More section. The P30 Pro also has a mode called Master AI that identifies what's in the scene, then adjusts the exposure and colors accordingly. It makes blue skies look really blue, and greenery and foliage extra vibrant. For most photos in this category, the P30 and iPhone are neck and neck. They each take excellent, sharp, and well-exposed images in the majority of situations. In some shots, the white balance on the P30 can look a little bit warm or yellow compared to the iPhone, and other times, outdoor shots looked a little warm and colors more saturated than the iPhone, which more closely resembled the actual scene. To test out the crazy zoom capabilities of the P30 Pro, I brought it and the iPhone to one of San Francisco's highest points, Coit Tower, to see what that 5 and 10x can do, and then even head to 50x. The 8-megapixel square camera on the back of the P30 Pro is an optical periscope lens that gets to 5x and a 10x hybrid zoom. If that's not enough, the P30 Pro can even go to 50x with digital zoom, but you're really going to struggle getting a steady shot here without a tripod or some sort of stabilization. It's more of a novelty, but it's still incredible to have this capability on a phone. The iPhone only has a 2x optical zoom, but it can get to 10x with digital zoom. This is what it looks like from both phones at 10x. There's really no competition here. For zoom, it's the P30 all the way. The ultra-wide-angle lens on the P30 Pro also lets you get a really different perspective on shots, which I love. Yeah, to get the same perspective on the iPhone, gotta get down, on the floor basically. Even then, it's just not the same. Moving to portraits, each phone has a dedicated mode that helps blur the background behind your subject to make them stand out. The iPhone lets you add different lighting effects, plus you can change the blur level using a simulated f-stop slider between f1.4 and f16. The P30 Pro has options for adding different blur effects, as well as its own version of stage lighting. There's also a beauty mode. But the P30 Pro can only take portraits of people. You can trick it sometimes with sculptures, but if you want to capture flowers or pets with that blurred background effect, you'll want to use aperture priority mode instead. But when using the dedicated portrait mode, the iPhone captures more detail in faces than the P30 Pro does, and the image looks sharper and more in focus. Even if you use aperture priority mode with a shallow depth of field, the P30 Pro still doesn't give as sharp of a result as the iPhone's portrait mode for faces. As for selfies, the P30 Pro lets you capture your face in 32 megapixels of glory compared to 7 megapixels on the iPhone. Both have portrait mode as well on the selfie camera, but there's no autofocus on the P30 Pro. But Smart HDR on the iPhone evens out shadows and highlights so the lighting looks a little less harsh. I'll leave it up to you to choose which one you prefer, but I think the P30 Pro just takes this one for me. Okay, time to record some selfie video on the P30 Pro and the iPhone XS Max. I have Smart HDR on the iPhone and HDR on the P30 Pro. Just take a look and see how each of them deals with my face, what's in focus, as well as the background, as well as the audio. There's so much to dive into in the default camera app on the P30 Pro for serious photographers. If you swipe over into the Pro mode, you'll get full control of your exposure. So that's ISO, shutter speed, aperture. And then if you swipe further up into the More option, you'll see that you can do light painting, panoramas, and even a monochrome image. Now, of course, you can get a lot of these controls on the iPhone as well, using all of the default options you have within the iOS camera app. Now, night mode on the P30 Pro is just amazing. You'll be able to capture details that you can hardly see with the naked eye or the iPhone. You do need to hold the phone as still as you can to get the best results, but it is worth it. Now, the iPhone doesn't look bad, especially when there is a light source in the photo, but it just can't keep up compared to what the P30 Pro produces with its dedicated night mode. For flash photos, both do a decent job, and the iPhone definitely illuminates the scene more, but I do prefer the look from the P30. Both phones can shoot 4K video, but the P30 Pro is at 30 frames a second, while the iPhone can also record at 60. There's optical image stabilization on the P30 Pro on all rear cameras except the ultra-wide, while the iPhone has OIS on both rear cameras. The video image looks sharp on both, but in daylight, the image on the P30 Pro looks quite oversaturated compared to the iPhone, especially on the red channel like you can see in this clip. You can also film using the 5x or 10x zoom on the P30, although it will be a bit shaky unless you can stabilize the phone. When the lights go down, both perform well, but again, the P30 looks super saturated and overly red. It also has more noise on the image compared to the iPhone, which also has the benefit of a mode called Auto Low Light FPS. It drops the frame rate from 30 to 24 frames a second when it detects low light. Just turn it on in the settings. Audio quality also sounds rich and full on both phones thanks to stereo microphones. When it comes to slow motion video, both phones can record at 240 frames a second. The iPhone can do full HD, while the P30 Pro is only at 720p at this frame rate. But the P30 Pro has a trick up its sleeve with super slow-mo at 960 frames a second. Despite all these bells and whistles, it was really hard to get the P30 Pro to focus and get a sharp image when recording slow-mo at any resolution. The iPhone just looks much better. The P30 Pro is the camera king when it comes to still images, especially at night and with zoom. But the iPhone excels with its portrait mode and is the winner for video. Both are incredible phones, and if you're an avid photographer, you'll be happy with either. So which phone did you think won the comparison? Was it the P30 Pro or the iPhone XS Max? Let me know in the comments below, and of course if you have any questions, you can find me on Twitter or leave me a comment too.